Okay, so I think there's two separate elements that are part of UDL, and the first is to do with the content, so the curriculum and the kind of materials that we teach, and the second is more to do with the processes and the ways that the kinds of assessment we use, the kind of teaching we do. So in terms of content, it's really important that all students see themselves reflected in the material that we use. And I think, recently gender and race have become much more included in the curriculum. And it's not yet the case for disability. So one of the things that I've been trying to do is look at all the kind of areas and topics that I teach, try and find examples which reference disability, or texts that are written by disabled authors, for example. So in a first year Introduction to French Literature course, which is basically about close reading and trying to understand how literature relates to society, I've been using a well-known French disability autobiography called Le Scaphandre et le Papillon, the diving bell and the butterfly. So it's not a course about disability, but that's just one of a number of texts that we use. But the idea is to get students kind of talking about disability as a kind of positive thing, as a creative thing, and making maybe connections with their own experience, either as disabled people or as, most of them know someone or have a relative or something who they would describe as disabled, but they've never really been able to talk about it. So I did that kind of more overtly in my final year course, which is the course on blindness and vision in French literature, which is my research-led course. It's the first course in the UK in which looks at blindness or looks at disability in French studies. And I wanted, again, to kind of use blindness, the theme of blindness in French culture, as a way of getting students to think about issues around what is normal, what is different, what is beauty, why is it that we live in a kind of age obsessed with how people look, and get them to kind of question assumptions. I think a lot of the point about a UDL is about questioning the kind of the canon and what's always been done and what's always been taught, and maybe just thinking about different ways of including material and different kind of methods. So that brings me on to the second part, which is about creating teaching and assessment, which more responds to the needs of the whole student body. So increasingly we kind of have to make there are lots of students who can't be assessed in the way we want them to be assessed, so by exam, for example, so they need extra time, they need to use a computer, they need to be on a room on their own. But if we started with those students, rather than your kind of ideal non-disabled student, then you could start imagining assessment methods which cater to all students' needs. So for example, instead of saying to students, right, you've got to sit in a room and you've got to produce some writing in 2 hours, say to them, okay, we're going to give you 2 days. You can work wherever you want. You can use whatever resources you want. So you can use a computer, you can handwrite, you can use online resources. What we want is your work, which is time limited and kind of has a task, a focused task. But we also want you to reflect on the process and explain to us what choices you made, how long you spent on it, how you managed your time, so that we're assessing the outcome, the knowledge and the skills, but we're also assessing the way in which they see themselves as learners and think about what they're doing. And it's a much more inclusive model because it's much more flexible, and it encourages people to kind of do things in the way that works for them, rather than us having to say, this is our model, and then these are all the exceptions that we're going to have to somehow fit in. That's what universal design for learning is. It's about creating a model which works no matter what a student's abilities or preferences are. So another example that I've been using, this is in my course in blindness and vision, is that I've been using audio description as a teaching tool. So audio description is increasingly commonly provided in museums and film, cinemas and art galleries. And it's basically where a sighted person describes a visual image or a visual event to a non-sighted person. In my course on blindness and vision, we look at photography. We look at photographs taken by a sighted photographer, Sophie Kahl, of blind people. So I noticed that the students aren't very good at looking at things. So they would skim over the images. But once I said to them, okay, we're gonna try and make this lesson more inclusive. We're gonna try and cater for someone who can't see the images. I asked them to describe them as if they were describing them to a non-sighted or a blind colleague. But also, of course, they were describing them to me, because I couldn't see all the detail in the images. So I had to use the students to tell me things about the photos. But as far as they were concerned, it was also a pedagogical exercise. So they started. We did a kind of collaborative description, because one of the problems I think with audio description is that it's very it can be quite paternalistic. So it's one person saying this is what this is. So blind people are very passive, and they just kind of are presented with information. So I wanted to make it much more of a conversation, because I think everyone notices different things about a picture, and there's no such thing as the right way to describe something. So I got all the students kind of to start describing it, and it was really interesting, because they kept commenting on each other's descriptions and saying, oh, okay, I thought that was a thing, I thought that was X, no, I think it's Y. And so it revealed the kind of questions in the picture, the tensions between the different elements in the picture. And because it was a course on blindness, it also meant that they could understand more about what it is like to be a blind person in a sighted world. It also, and I didn't think of this at the time, but it also really suited those students who have a non-visual way of learning, because they were able to focus on words rather than on looking, and all the students actually said to me afterwards, and it was clear from the assessment, that this is the image they remembered best from the course, because they'd spent time actually thinking about it. So I think that's a really good example of how just a slight change in an assessment can make the whole course much more accessible, but also include all the different kind of abilities of the students.